All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome on in to the Auburn Daily Show, episode 22 of the Auburn Daily Show. Lance Dawe here with you on this relatively cloudy day in Auburn, Alabama. Hope everybody out there is doing well. A little stressed heading into this episode. Equipment was not being kind. Thankfully, we have gotten everything sorted out. So we're all good. We are all good. Again, hope everybody out there listening is doing well on today's episode of the Auburn Daily Show. Got a couple of interesting topics surrounding Auburn and the NFL draft. Not really talked about Auburn and the NFL draft, really, I think at all on this show. And I kind of wanted to dive into that today, talking about some of Auburn's NFL prospects and where they may potentially land. Auburn, quite honestly, does not have a lot of NFL prospects right now, but they've got a couple. And I wanted to go through some articles today that our guys over at auburndaily.com have put together. Zach Blackerby, Trey Lee, Ridge Lindsay, they've all been putting out some content discussing that. So I wanted to go over some potential landing spots for all of these different guys. And I'm trying, where should we start today? Should we start with Roger McCreary? Should we lead off with McCreary and then just work our way down from there? Let's do that. Let's start with Roger McCreary. Zach Blackerby, host of the Locked On Auburn podcast, wrote this article. You can go find it over at auburndaily.com if you want to read through it. But 5 potential landing spots. We're going to go through 5 potential landing spots for every single one of these guys. 5 potential landing spots for Roger McCreary. And obviously here, this is actually, we did an NFL mock draft over at auburndaily.com. If you want to go find that, I actually may, after this episode is done, I may put that link in the description. Every single pick of the entire first round, the guys over at Auburn Daily, including myself, rotated around and made picks. I would highly encourage you to go check out that mock draft. Really, really fun. But the New England Patriots had a selection late in the first round, like pick 22, 23, 24, somewhere around there. And I actually got the New England Patriots pick. And I figured, considering Zach's a New England Patriots fan and I wanted Roger McCreary to go in the first round, a little bit of a biased pick, but I put McCreary, projected McCreary to go to the Patriots in the first round. And Zach Blackerby said, one of the potential landing spots could be with the Pats. Says the New England Patriots have gone after Auburn players over the past several seasons. That's true. Jay Jones has been a key defender on the Patriot defense, and New England is always looking for players to serve a specific role. Brandon King was a key special teamer for years. Roger McCreary could offer more of a bump and run type of role to the defense, and he could also play special teams for the Pats. One potential place that Roger McCreary could go, and personally, I would like to see that. I'd love to see McCreary find a way to get drafted in the first round. I'd love to see that happen. I think the Pats would probably be the most realistic spot for him to land if he were to be a first rounder. Second team here, the Chicago Bears. And according to Zach Blackerby, this has been one of the more popular places to see McCreary land in mock drafts. The Bears have 2 second-round selections in the range where McCreary is expected to be selected. They currently hold the 39th and 48th overall picks. I hope that McCreary is able to, he's not able to fall to 48th, essentially. I'd love to see the Bears pick him up with that first pick in the second round, Trey Lee, Michael Aaron. What's going on, guys? Hope you guys are doing well. Thank you so much, Michael. Really appreciate that. Trying to put out some good content here, not only on this show, but over at auburndaily.com as well. Got a great group of writers over there, including Trey, who's currently in the chat. But yeah, the Chicago Bears, the second place that McCreary could potentially land up. I like the Bears. I like the Pats. There are a few teams in the NFL that I either despise or just don't really care for. And the Bears are actually one of the ones that I actually like a little bit more than that. If they could just get that offense figured out, man, they would be a decent team. The third team here on McCreary's list is the Dallas Cowboys. And this is what Zach says about the Cowboys. The Cowboys have plenty of needs on defense, and that's facts. But why not address the cornerback position in the second round? And they currently hold the 56th overall pick. I don't really know if McCreary will fall this far in the draft. I would hate to see it. I would really hate to see it after him being a projected first-round selection just a few months ago. I don't think it's possible. I can definitely see a world where this happens, but within my bias is my prediction, which is I just don't see him, nor do I want him to fall this far to 56. So while I wouldn't be opposed to seeing McCreary as a Cowboy, I would much rather another place have him. And I don't think that he's gonna fall that far. The fourth team here, the Tampa Bay Bucks. Yes, absolutely. There's about 500,000 Auburn players already down there on that defense. Zach notes, why not add another Auburn cornerback? Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, already down there for the past couple of years. It's not necessarily a roster need for Tampa Bay, but why stop doing something that's worked for you in the past is what Zach said, and I think that's a fair point. Maybe bolster that secondary. Get a guy that it's good at doing something that I don't think a ton of people are good at necessarily doing in the NFL. And quite frankly, not a lot of people are able to do it in college, be able to consistently shut down the opposing team's best receiver in a press type of situation. It's genuinely an impressive feat, especially considering the type of receivers that McCreary was going up against in the SEC. I don't necessarily think that he's a matchup that you would like in the NFL against the NFL's best receiver on the opposing side. But, I definitely think that he could, with a little bit of development, poise that type of threat to an offense, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. And then the final team here, the Cincinnati Bengals. I think the most important thing for the Bengals, and Zach notes this in the article, is the offensive line. I think you have to address that first before you do anything else. But still, I think that, and Zach also notes this as well, with their second and third picks, they probably want to look at some defensive pieces, specifically in that secondary. There were some issues last season with the secondary. I'm curious to see if Cincinnati's able to potentially look McCreary's way if he's still on the board. The Bengals have the 63rd overall pick. If McCreary falls that far, I think Roger would be a good spot for him I think Roger would be a good player for the Bengals to pick up. So that's 5 potential landing spots for Roger McCreary. Now 5 potential landing spots for Zakoby McClain. Now McClain, in my opinion, probably going to be somewhere between a 4th, 5th, 6th round pick. I really hope he is able to get drafted as high as possible. But I think a lot of people are going to be focusing on what McCreary brings to the table. But I think Zakoby's going to be a later round selection. And I mean, Sports Illustrated's big board reflects that. He's the 254th player on the big board, which means he's going to go near the end of the draft or sign with a team as a free agent. I can see teams looking at him in the 5th round. I personally can see that. But the 5 teams he could potentially end up with, the Miami Dolphins, and this is what Zach says about the Dolphins. They're coming off a season where they were okay, but they're seeking to take a leap away from okay to elite. They have new head coach in Mike McDaniel. They've got Tyreek Hill now. The Dolphins are in desperate need of some young linebackers, some fresh faces on that defense. McClain is somebody that they could draft in the 7th round and develop into a star, is what Zach says. I think that he definitely could be a rotational piece that would develop into somebody that would be a legitimate linebacker in the NFL. But I hate to say this, and fans get on to me, but I'm trying to be realistic here with some of these prospects that Auburn has. And while I do like some of the potential in these different prospects, on paper, it doesn't look like Auburn's got a star in this year's NFL draft class, right? It doesn't look like that. Now, I do think that McClain can develop into an NFL starter. I'm just not. Me personally, not comfortable with saying that he could be a star, and people may get upset with that, and I can understand that. The second team that could potentially take Zakoby McClain, the Denver Broncos. They're trying to win now. They've already got Russell Wilson in. They've got some interesting pieces on offense. They've got a lot of receivers. They've got a decent defensive line. I think you have to look at that second level of the defense, in my opinion, maybe picking up some linebackers in this NFL draft. McClain would be an interesting addition to a team that already has, I think, some answers in some key spots, kind of maybe fill out some different areas of concern. And McClain could be one of those extra pieces. This is something that Zach notes. He could be an addition to the team. He could develop and have a chance to win a ring on the bench his rookie year. The Denver Broncos are in that type of position. The third team here, the Cleveland Browns. And Zach notes here, the one position that the Browns need to draft early and often is linebacker. They have an outstanding team and recently traded for Pro Bowler Deshaun Watson. Zach says he could see the Browns taking McClain with one of their seventh round picks and see if he can develop into a tremendous asset for the team. Don't disagree with anything there. The fourth team here, the Washington Commanders. Unlike these last few teams, the Commanders are not in a win-now mentality. They're trying to build around some of their young weapons, Chase Young, Terry McLaurin, Antonio Gibson. Linebacker, according to Zach Blackerby, is one of the position groups of need for the Commanders. They're desperate need of help at that spot. Like we just mentioned, they've got a solid defensive line. Washington has a solid defensive line. Probably need a little bit more help and run support than anything. If I remember their 2021 season correctly, McClain could offer a little bit of that. Very, very high volume tackler. The Commanders could take him with one of their last few picks and grow his talent to the next level. And then the fifth place that Zach Blackerby has here, he could potentially go undrafted and sign with the team. And this is what Zach says. Another possibility for McClain is to go undrafted and sign with a team that needs some young linebackers. Where McClain stands on draft boards gives this outcome some real possibility. If this were to happen, McClain would have to fight to make the team. But as Auburn fans know, fight and heart are two things that Zakoby McClain is not lacking. And there you have it. I 100% agree. So those are 5 spots for McCreary. Those are 5 spots for Zakoby McClain. And then we've got 5 potential landing spots here for Smoke Monday. Man, the freedom of doing things live. You can talk, you can pause, you can take a breath, you can get a little water so that you don't absolutely lose your voice halfway through an episode. But yeah, Smoke Monday, the third potential NFL prospect here for the Auburn Tigers. 5 places that Zakoby McClain could potentially end up. The Bucks. We talked about it a little bit ago. You know, the Auburn to Tampa Bay pipeline has been relatively successful. Trey Lee notes that in this article of his. Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, John Franklin was actually there. Believe it or not, he still might actually be on the practice squad. I might be mistaken, but I believe he's still there. KJ Britt, linebacker for Auburn, is also there. Smoke Monday could join standout safety Antoine Winfield Jr. in the defensive backfield and become a dynamic duo that the NFC South would fear for years to come. That's Trey Lee's take. Franklin's in the USFL now. Really interesting. Does he play for Birmingham? That would be really funny if he played for Birmingham. But yeah, I'd love to see Smoke on the Bucks. I'd love to see Smoke on the Bucks. The New York Jets, not a place I'd like to see Smoke Monday. And this is something that Trey notes. The Jets need everything. Literally everything. They need everything right now. They've gotten a couple of experienced guys in their backfield already, defensive backfield already. But Smoke Monday, I don't think would be a bad choice, and Trey agrees. Tampa Bay. Okay, he's in the USFL at Tampa Bay. That's funny. That's interesting. But yeah, the Jets actually already have a few Auburn Tigers. CJ Uzoma was traded from the Bengals to the Jets. Carl Lawson's there. Jamian Sherwood's there. Smoke Monday, I don't think would be a bad pick. The third team here potentially for Smoke Monday is the Indianapolis Colts. According to Trey Lee, Malik Hooker left the Colts in 2020 and joined the Dallas Cowboys, leaving a hole in one of the safety spots. The Colts seem to have the gritty, smash-mouth football identity with players such as Darius Leonard, Jonathan Taylor, Matt Ryan, and others. Smoke Monday is a hard-hitting player that could fill a hole and fit the style the Colts bring to the table as long as he does not get called for targeting. I added that last little bit myself. But yeah, Smoke, hard-hitting player, ball hawk type of dude, very aggressive in coverage. I think the things that you have to be concerned with Smoke Monday as a prospect is think he's got tight hips, does not necessarily get across the field comfortably. I think that he's decent in pass coverage, but he was susceptible to the explosive play every now and then last year and in 2020, quite frankly. But I think that he hits hard. I think he's aggressive. I think you like that style of play, and it could potentially fit what the Colts have got going on currently. So that's the third spot that Smoke Monday could potentially land. The fourth spot, the Philadelphia Eagles. They don't really have a lot of depth on their defense, specifically at linebacker and safety, according to Trey Lee. Could be a benefit to Smoke Monday. Look, the Eagles may come into this draft and say, we've got to fill those positions of need. And while they may still go after a couple of different pieces, maybe on the offensive side of the ball, if I'm not mistaken, I believe I had Chris Olave going to them in the first round. So they may be looking at some offensive pieces early. But as they get into the back half of the draft, it's like, okay, let's see if we can find some guys that can maybe fill some holes on this depth chart. And Smoke Monday could potentially be one of those guys that the Eagles look at. And then the final team here, the Super Bowl champions, the Los Angeles Rams. Eric Weddle came back for 1 year, won a ring, and now he's gone. I think that Smoke Monday could be somebody that could be a backup type of depth piece for the Rams. And this is something that Trey Lee notes. The Rams also play multiple linebackers because they run a 3-4 scheme. So Monday could be a versatile weapon in the box if called upon. And this reminds me, and gosh, if somehow Smoke Monday finds this, do not take offense to this. This is not my quote. But Charlie 5 will occasionally come on the Locked on Auburn podcast. And I remember putting together a quote graphic last season, like in the middle of the season, about Smoke Monday. And Charlie 5 said, Smoke Monday is a linebacker in a safety's body, essentially. Now, you can take that for what it is and kind of decide, whether or not that's positive or negative yourself. But my point being is that he is he's a physical guy. He's not afraid to help in run support. He's not afraid to start closer to the line of scrimmage and to try and get into the backfield. So, yeah, I think that Smoke Monday could be somebody that could potentially help out in the box a little bit. I think that's a good spot for him to potentially land there. So those are 5 more spots. Zakoby McClain, Roger McCreary, Smoke Monday. And then there's one more guy here that I kind of want to just skim through briefly. This was written by Ridge Lindsay over at auburndaily.com. Ridge just hopped on with us. Great article from Ridge if you want to go check it out. And this is 4 potential landing spots for Demetrius Robertson. Former 5-star recruit, initially played at Cal, then transferred to Georgia, and then transferred to Auburn, played 6 years in college. And did not necessarily have an impressive year outside of his freshman season at Cal, where he was a freshman All-American, but still former 5-star guy. He's got a lot of talent. So there are 4 potential landing spots here, and there's nothing specific. So we'll just kind of skim through these real quick. Ridge Lindsay notes that he could find his way onto an NFL roster. And this is what Ridge says. NFL in-season rosters have 53 spots on them. It'll be an uphill battle for Robertson to make a roster, but it is possible. Unfortunately, Robertson will likely not be drafted in the upcoming NFL draft, so this leaves a big challenge for Robertson to make a 53-man roster. Crazier things have happened, but I don't like his chances. I think that's fair, so we move on to the next potential landing spot for Robertson, an NFL practice squad, which I think is much more likely for the former Auburn receiver. Every NFL team has a 16-man practice squad that is not allowed to dress out for their games. Therefore, Robertson may end up on a practice squad. And Trey Lee says the NFL practice squad seems like a slightly unlikely destination for Robertson, but a possibility. I think it's likely. Zachary Whitfield in the chat, War Eagle to you as well. Appreciate you watching, dude. Going through 5 potential landing spots for all these different Auburn Tigers and these NFL prospects, and then 4 here for Demetrius Robertson. A third potential spot is the USFL. And I could legitimately see Robertson going and making a name for himself in the USFL. And Auburn's already got a few players currently in there. Sal Cannella, John Franklin III, Marquell Harrell are all currently playing. John Franklin III, by the way, now I'm playing wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Bandits. So Trey Lee let us know earlier he's playing for the Tampa Bay Bandits earlier, but I didn't realize he was playing receiver. I thought he was like a defensive back for the Bucks. Oh well, interesting. You know what would be really cool, and this is just completely derailing the conversation we're having here about D-Rob. But you know what would be really cool is, like, you know how the MLB has like minor leagues, right? Why wouldn't spring football leagues essentially be minor leagues for NFL teams? Or why wouldn't they have like a minor league type of system where they could call up and then send down different players? I don't know. Somebody may be able to tell me why that's a really bad idea, but I don't know. That's just a random thought I just had, because I see Tampa Bay Bandits and you've got Tampa Bay Bucks. I mean, that just Tampa Bay Bandits sounds like a minor league team for the Bucks. I don't know. It sounds like a possibility. But yeah, the USFL and then finally the CFL. And according to Ridge Lindsay, the CFL is the most likely destination for Robertson. Former Auburn players with the same caliber of play as Robertson ended up in the CFL and have had some decent success. And then Ridge goes on to note some of the players who had solid seasons: Darvin Adams, Quan Bray, Ryan Davis, Duke Williams, Cameron Artis-Payne, Ricardo Lewis, Nick Marshall, Jonathan Mincy. A lot of different guys that Auburn's had in the past have had some success in the CFL. Zachary Whitfield asked, what is the ceiling for the Auburn Tigers this year? Any chance for an SEC championship game? I think the ceiling for Auburn this year is I think the ceiling is 10 wins. Now, it would be really, really difficult, in my opinion, for Auburn to get to that point, but I think that's the ceiling. And if Auburn's going to get to that point, and if there's any chance for an SEC championship game, we've talked about this recently on the show. We're probably going to continue to dive into this as the offseason goes on. I think Auburn has to be able, a lot of people are talking about the quarterback spot, and yes, quarterback needs to be able to play well, needs to be able to play more efficiently than it has over the past couple of seasons. I think it's really important that Auburn establishes their run blocking and their ground game, because I think that with Ike Hilliard's ability to develop some of these receivers, I think the passing scheme is going to be better than it was last year. And so I think some of these receivers are going to have an opportunity to stand out. But I think that I'm not saying that it's going to be taken care of. I think it's going to be a work in progress, but I think that it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. And there's optimism to believe that those guys will develop. But you've got that, right? You've got the short to intermediate passing game. Auburn already proved with the lackluster quarterback situation last season that they could still throw for over 240 yards per game. I think that's the best they've had since like 2004. If you can combine that with a respectable ground game, and you can kind of figure out how to run the ball consistently with Tank Bigsby, he's your best player on offense. If you can find a way to get that run blocking going and allow him to show what he can do, I mean, you've got a shot at the SEC championship. If you can average 38, 39 points a game, and your defense continues to build on what it had last season, kind of developing that personnel with this new scheme, it's possible. I think that it's not out of the realm of possibility. ESPN's FPI agrees with that. But the ceiling, I think, if we're being realistic, is 10 wins. I really, really have a hard time seeing Auburn beating Georgia, Alabama, or let's say they beat Georgia or Alabama. I have a hard time seeing them beat A&M or Ole Miss or somebody like that as well. So I think 10 wins is fair. Trey Lee asked, who's your favorite Auburn player? Mine is TJ Finley. Oh, man, you should ask that question. We should ask that question with Zach and Andrew Stefaniak on next roundtable. It would be, we would be here for an hour, man. We would be here for an hour discussing that. I'll say this about TJ Finley. If and Zach said something similar to this recently on the Locked On Auburn podcast. If he's able to go out there and perform well in this passing scheme, and he's able to throw for like what 2,500, 2,800 yards, if he doesn't throw picks and he builds on his accuracy and he's just kind of good, not great, not just like slightly above average, I think Brian Harsin I think Brian Harsin would be doing something right. He would have accomplished something great if DJ Finley was the starter and ended up doing that. Just above average numbers. Zach says, everyone around me is raving on TJ Finley. I'm not sold on him. I want to see what Zach Calzada does. I want to see what Zach Calzada does too. I'll say this, and I'm not saying that this is you, Zach, and I'm 100% guilty of this. Auburn fans typically, whenever they get to see what a quarterback has to offer, they immediately start looking at the back. And I'm not saying just Auburn fans do this. I think a lot of different fan bases do this. They immediately start to look at the backup quarterback and what he could potentially bring to the table. And the moment that the starter doesn't have a great game, it's like, we have to be able to play this guy, not necessarily start him. In some situations, it's been like, we got to start TJ Finley, we got to start whoever. But there's been moments in the past, like even with Nick Marshall and Jeremy Johnson, it's like, okay, he had a great game against Arkansas. Dude, we have to play Jeremy Johnson more. Back in 2014, if any of you remember that, fans were saying, we got to play Jeremy Johnson more. And so it's just like, I can appreciate seeing something and wanting to see something new and fresh at the quarterback position. And I don't think that's necessarily the stance that, Zach, you're taking. And I agree with you. I want to see what Zach Calzada does. He had a decent O-line at Texas A&M. I think Auburn's pass protection is going to be a little bit better now. And now how consistently Auburn utilizes his strength, which is attacking downfield, throwing some downfield passes, throwing some shots. I don't know how often Auburn's going to do that, but I think that if Zach Calzada is your starter, he's got a really, really strong arm. The ball comes out of his hand quick. You've got to be able to get him in some passing situations where he doesn't have to put a lot of touch on the ball early on, or who knows, against Mercer and San Jose State, you may want him to work on that. But yeah, I'm interested to see what Calzada does. And Robbie Ashford's still in the mix. I mean, we don't know who's going to win this battle, but I think that there's different positives that you can pick out for individual people. And Zach Pouncey here asked, what do you say to the people exclaiming Auburn is going 5-7? Well, I think Vegas normally knows what's going on. Vegas normally knows what's up, and I believe the win total was opened at 5. The win total for Auburn was open at 5. And there are a lot of different folks on social media, not necessarily Auburn people, but just people in the media sphere, just doing their early predictions for the SEC and the SEC West. And a lot of people are saying Auburn's going 5-7. They're not finding a way to get to 6 wins with this schedule. And I think there are a lot of different reasons you could use to back that logic up. I think there are a lot of different things that you could, a lot of different things that you could point to say it's possible. It's possible. But I would push back on that for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think that Auburn still has enough talent on roster to make a bowl game. And I think that was proven last year whenever Auburn did make a bowl game after losing their starting quarterback and just kind of falling to injury late in the season. I mean, if you have Bo Nix for those final 3 games of the year, Auburn wins like 8 or 9 games. They don't go 6-7. They go like 8-5, 9-4. And nobody would be having this conversation. In my opinion, at least the possibility would have been there. So I think that if the quarterback situation is sound this season, the run blocking gets a little bit better. You've got somebody that can develop your receivers. Year 2 in a new system with a new defense. How does this pass rush that I think is going to be really good this year, how do they develop? I don't know. I think there are a lot of reasons to say Auburn's not going 5-7. They're going to be able to contend and win in these games specifically. But also, I think the second way that you could look at Auburn's not going 5-7 is like every single time Auburn is projected to do poorly, they exceed and they exceed expectations is what I'm trying to say. And I think that, expectations will be adjusted midway through the season if Auburn somehow starts off 5-1. But I think Auburn has consistently overachieved whenever it's least expected. And so I think that one of the things that you could say is like, it's Auburn. It's Auburn football. That's why they're not going 5-7. So I can understand where people are coming from saying that they won't make a bowl game, but at the same time, like I think there are a lot of reasons to point to no, actually they're going to be able to do these things in these games. And the ones that come to mind for me are specifically Arkansas and Ole Miss. And say what you want about what Ole Miss has done in the portal. They've gotten a lot of different pieces, right? And Arkansas is a good team, but you saw how those games happened last year. I mean, in a year where Auburn went 6-7, they beat 9-4 Arkansas on the road, 38-23. They beat one of the best scoring offenses in the country by 11 at home after essentially doing nothing on the offensive side of the ball. It comes back to the talent level on these rosters still. And I not only think Auburn has a sound coaching staff, because because Brian Harsin was able to perform with a lack of talent at Boise against Power 5 schools. Not only does Auburn have that talent and a sound coaching staff, but I think that, they've what is the word I'm trying to look for? Not necessarily the culture, but just like they've got that type of athlete that Ole Miss and Arkansas doesn't, right? And I think that Auburn having those opportunities to win those games this season, I think it's likely that they at least make it close, if not win it outright, if not win one of those games convincingly. Looking at Arkansas at home, which could also end up being a trap game. Talked about that before on the show. But yeah, that's where I stand on that. Zach also says, no, I like TJ, but a little incident Zach Calzada, we haven't seen a lot, but one thing I know for sure, Tank Bigsby will live up to his name. Yeah, I agree. I think the Tank, if he gets a little bit better run blocking, man, I'm excited to see where the offense goes, because I think that opens up the passing game. But if Auburn, and we've talked about this before on the show recently, if Auburn wants to identify themselves as a controlling physical offense that has a controlling ground game and dominates pace of play and will wear you down, not necessarily in the Gus Malzahn style, but more of the West Coast type of offense, except that same type of philosophy, they're going to need to bring in that type of personnel, because I don't think it's currently on roster. At least not 100%. They've got to be able to bring in that type of personnel, because right now I don't think they've got the offensive line to consistently do what they want to do. Zach Whitfield and Zach Pouncey. A lot of Zachs on today's show. Zach Blackerby, Zach Whitfield, Zach Pouncey. Zach Whitfield and Zach Pouncey both say, I think that we can beat Ole Miss. I agree. Now, Ole Miss is going to be revamped on the offensive side of the ball. Like, don't get it twisted. Like, they're still going to have a really good offense. But for Auburn to have held that team to 20 points with their scheme that they had last year, and I know Matt Corral got hurt, but for let's say even in a healthy game, Ole Miss scores like 28 or 30. Okay, well, let's say in a normal game with a normal quarterback, with a sound offensive line, Auburn's able to score 38 or 42 because they're able to keep things going on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, Auburn's still, I think, better than Ole Miss. I think Auburn's still better than Ole Miss. Zach says, I meant to say TJ is inconsistent. Yep, I agree with that. And I don't know if I've talked about it a ton on the show, just breaking down like SEC StatCat numbers. But he had, I think, the second highest uncatchable ball rate in the SEC last season, meaning he threw the second highest rate of uncatchable balls to receivers. And the only guy ahead of him was Mike Wright of Vanderbilt. And, there are certain things you can say about TJ Finley positively. He's got a big arm, really big kid. I think that he's shown flashes of potential. And I think you give him a full offseason and he could show that he is more than what he was at LSU, and he's more than what he was last season in his limited time. But also there are a lot of statistics out there that would indicate that he would not be the right fit for Auburn if they want to achieve what they want to. So we just got to see what happens with the quarterback battle there. But yeah, I agree. He is relatively inconsistent. All right, we've got one more thing I want to talk about today. The statistic of the day. Before we do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at aushirts.com. We've been talking about them a lot here recently on the show, AUshirts.com is the new place to go to help you flex your Auburn fandom. Got a lot of fantastic different designs with a lot of different players actually contributing to the site, asking for designs. They've got some really cool stuff out right now. We've already shown this on the show quite a lot here recently. Josh Hall repping the thick King design that was made for Sonny DeShera. Really, really cool design there. Was repping it at the Alabama State game just a few nights ago. And then also, AUshirts.com has this new design for Blake Burkhalter, closing time with a backwards K instead of a C. That is a sweet, sweet design. That is really, really sweet. But yeah, you can go check that out over at AUshirts.com. And right now, AU Shirts is giving Auburn Daily viewers 10% off their order. And all you have to do is go over AUshirts.com and use promo code DAILY at checkout. That's DAILY. Again, AUshirts.com using promo code DAILY for 10% off. Would highly encourage you guys to go check those shirts out, supporting the players and supporting the community. Super dope place, AU Shirts. All right, the statistic of the day. Wanted to briefly go over this. And we may break this down a little bit more on tomorrow's episode. And Zach says I'm excited to see our tight ends this year. I'm talking about, guess what? Talk about tight ends. Here we go. Zachary Whitfield says it might be time to sign into Zach Calzada with all the Zach going on. Yeah, there's a lot of Zachs on today's show, man. Tyler Fromm looked good on 80. He did look good, man. He broke. Was it Donovan Kaufman's ankles that he broke? I think it was Donovan Kaufman's ankles that he broke because he caught it and then he switched into a different direction. But I want to talk about John Samuel Schenker here for a second. The emergence of the tight end. It's been awesome, right? At Auburn under Brian Harsin. Auburn's pass catchers have been primarily wide receivers for quite a while now. Offensive coordinator turned head coach Gus Malzahn didn't really like to use the tight ends in 2010 during 2013 all the way to 2020. Didn't utilize tight ends in the passing game. Instead, they were primarily used as blockers, used on the line of scrimmage, sometimes even as the hybrid H-back in the backfield. The receptions were reserved for the receivers, a unit that was, in my opinion, underdeveloped and underachieved during Malzahn's tenure with Auburn. And that's not to say if they had gotten more yards, then it would have been better. While that certainly would have been a factor, I'm not saying that that's objectively the only reason that they underachieved. Well, we can get into that another day. But schemes have changed now. We can move past that. Schemes have changed now. Brian Harsin, more of a West Coast feel to this passing game, and he's done what a lot of different Auburn fans have been asking for recently, which is throw the ball to the stinking tight end. Utilize it. We've got a lot of them. Throw it to them. And Auburn certainly did last season. And the number one target in 2021 was John Samuel Schenker. Hauled in 33 catches, 413 yards, set an Auburn record for the most receptions and receiving yards by a tight end in a single season. But the stat of the day here revolves around what he did on third down. Here's your statistic. John Samuel Schenker was the only receiver on Auburn's roster to catch every pass thrown his way on third down. It's a minimum of 5 attempts. So he had 6 receptions, 6 targets, 6 receptions for 80 yards and 3 first downs on third down. He was automatic. Every single ball thrown his way, he hauled in. So what does that mean? It means Auburn essentially, they've got a number of tight ends to look towards in the passing game this season. John Samuel Schenker, Luke Deal, Landon King, Tyler Fromm, Michael Riley Ducker's going to be here. All of those guys will be competing for playing time this fall. However, I think Schenker's going to be the one to lead Auburn in third down situations out of that group, kind of being that safety valve for the Tigers. Now, I know 6 targets on third down is not a lot, but I also want to point out that he hauled every single pass in that was thrown his way. He picked up first downs consistently at a 50% rate, actually. So I would expect in year 2 under Brian Harsin that he gets some more of those targets, and Auburn tries to look his way a little bit more. And then on top of that, I think you've got to think about the quarterback situation. Let's say in week 3 or week 4, you're playing Penn State or Missouri, and you're still trying to work out the kinks with your quarterback. Finley, Ashford, Calzada, somehow Garner, who knows? But let's say you're trying to work out the kinks and you want somebody safe to consistently throw to kind of work them into games, especially early in contests. if you're facing an early third down, why not throw it to John Samuel Schenker on a hitch route a couple of different times, right? I think he's going to get more opportunities to be that guy and be that safety valve in clutch situations this season. And Zach Pouncey even notes he's clutch. I agree. Zachary Whitfield says, I'm from Georgia, so every year I look forward to the Auburn versus Georgia game. So tight ends need to get involved early and often. Georgia's actually, they've had some really good tight ends as of late as well. Brock Bowers currently there, absolutely lighting the world on fire. Just a really crazy specimen, just a freak of nature there. But yeah, I think Auburn early in the season is going to look towards their tight end, specifically JSS, to kind of get quarterbacks comfortable in games. And I would say another reason that I believe that is you look back to some of maybe the open practices, maybe it's the spring games, I should say now, when we've gotten to see Auburn work, whether it be in 2-minute drills or just trying to work the offense down the field in passing situations, often one of the first reads for the quarterback would be a hitch, an out, or a check down to a tight end. We've gotten to see that consistently. So if Auburn's trying to work that more into their system this season, look, I think the Missouri and Penn State games would be perfect opportunities to get John Samuel Schenker looks and safety valve type of situations to where he can establish himself as that guy early in September and then become more of that as the season goes on. I also want to point out, man, the more I see this guy wearing number 25, the more I feel comfortable with it. It just looks right. After thinking like, man, this is going to be such a weird move to 25 after being 47 for so long, he looks like he belongs out there as number 25. It's like he's one of those classic Auburn style H-backs that they've had over the past decade or so, except he's going to actually get the ball thrown his way. So that's what I had today for today's episode of the Auburn Daily Show. Really appreciate you guys watching. Look, if you're not already following us on the socials, you can go ahead and do it at SI_Auburn on Twitter. Link is in the description. You can also follow us on Facebook at Auburn Daily. We live stream every single weekday at 4 p.m. on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Please be sure to subscribe, by the way, to the YouTube and the Twitch. That would mean a lot to us as well. But guys, that's going to do it. Thank you so much for watching another episode of the Auburn Daily Show. I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and God bless.